Hello, everyone. Welcome to our webinar this evening, The Three Pillars of the Effective Dental CEO. We've had a lot of people register for this webinar, so we're going to give everyone just a couple more minutes. So grab your drink, get ready, get seated, find a quiet spot. We're going to start in a few minutes and dive right in to how to be an effective CEO within a dental organization. All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Scott Leune, and I'm joining you this evening to walk you through the different concepts of how to be an effective CEO in a dental practice. And I'm not sure how you guys feel about your abilities as a leader or your abilities as a CEO inside of a dental office, but what I've found is that a lot of times we're pulled in a lot of different directions. And sometimes it's just hard enough to get through the day as a dentist. It's just hard enough to get through the day. Sometimes as even maybe you're an office manager listening to this, but not only are you an office manager, you're having to check people in and check people out and follow up on unpaid claims, and you're just pulled in a lot of different directions. Yet when we get home, we can't seem to shut it off. When we get home, we know that our organization isn't performing like it could. When we think about our success and our practice, it just feels like there's always fires to put out, and there's always things that bring us stress, kind of that loads our shoulders, we have to carry around. And sometimes this could even burn us out as dentists. It can burn us out as owners. It just feels like a heavy thing to carry. So this webinar is going to be focused on how we can get in front of that, how we can start planning our own job role as CEO. Can we put the time in and get organized and get aligned? Can we have a reset that now puts us in a very effective path of leading this office? We've studied to be a great dentist. We've managed to own this practice. Maybe we've managed to run it the best we can and to lead the people best we can. Maybe it's time to invest in ourselves becoming a CEO now. Maybe it's time to professionalize our business to the next level and therefore professionalize ourselves to the next level to have a great next year. I mean, a great month, a great quarter, a great next year, so that this practice is in a new place. So I'm going to dive in. There are three main pillars, and I'm going to dive into each one in more detail. And you can see that if we can master these pillars, we are going to have a lot of control over this practice to bring consistency, to take away stress, and to, of course, to hopefully optimize the financial health of it, the patient care, the environment, what's it like to work there. We want to elevate these things. Patients are happier, our employees are happier, our profit is higher, and all of that without us feeling burnt out. That's where we're going with this. Now, I'm sure that there's plenty of people on this webinar that don't know much about me. I'm not going to spend a lot of time explaining it. You can find it online. But I do want to say that, I have owned a whole lot of offices across the country. I've helped build hundreds of startups and manage them. I've sold practices, and at one point, about 20,000 dental offices in North America were connected to a company that I owned to help run their practice in some way. And so I'm coming to you today from someone that has started as a solo dentist in one location and gone through the process of self-awareness and improvement to become a CEO of not just multiple practices, but also of large-scaled organizations inside of dentistry. And a lot of where I'm coming from comes from the scars from my experience. It comes from the pain points, but some of it also comes from the fact that I continue to coach dentists one-on-one. I continue to experience their careers. I get to watch them grow. I get to watch them develop as CEOs and get control of their destiny. So what I'm coming to you with comes from all of those experiences. Now let's start with the three main pillars of being a dental CEO. And you may have heard me describe these online or in the past, but these are the three pillars. We've got operations, financials, and people. Now, what does that actually mean? Operations. Operations, that's what you see every day. That's the phone ringing and someone answering. That's you completing a procedure in the software and collecting payment. That is verifying insurance. It's resubmitting a failed claim. The day-to-day operations are what you're used to actually trying to manage. And the operations, what people do, that creates your production and your collections. Okay, so that's the first pillar. What people do every day that can increase, hopefully, our collections. The second pillar is different. The second pillar are the financials. We have to master managing the financials. And as you'll see, the financials are primarily what we spend our collections on. All of the things that we pay for, from supplies to lab to employees to credit card fees. I mean, all kinds of things we pay for, recurring subscriptions. And we have to become a master at managing that as a second pillar. Obviously, if we can raise the first pillar up, and if we can keep the second pillar at bay, we generate profit, right? So we are going to try to optimize our operations with the best practices of scheduling, the best practices of claims management or of collections and case acceptance, right? We're going to optimize our operations. But at the same time, we've got to keep another eye on our costs on the financial side. We've got to lower or hold down our costs as much as reasonable so that the difference between the two generates profit for us as a CEO, as an organization. And that third pillar we're going to talk about, that is the pillar of managing people. And primarily what I'm going to talk about are managing the team members, the people that work alongside of us. How can we make sure that we have accountability? How can we make sure that we are staffed properly, that we are fully utilizing our capacity, that we've got healthy communication with these people that we work alongside of, that ultimately the people can keep operating well, the people can keep spending our money appropriately, and the people can keep treating our patients at a high level. How do we manage that? And you could imagine if we become somewhat good at these three pillars, we have completely changed our life as an owner or as a CEO. If we become somewhat good at getting like good operations, good results, good collections, and we also have good control over our expenses, that gives us profit. And we've got good people management, that gives us kind of this predictability and this great work environment and this retention of employees and retention of patients, retention of systems, retention of habits. If we can become good at those three things, so many of the fires that we deal with today never start or are put out early. So that's the introduction to those three main pillars. Now let's dive a little deeper into each one. So we're going to start with the pillar of operations. Operations, the day-to-day, what we do every day, it creates collections, right? And if we think about, well, what is that? What are the tasks? We can look at our people and like look at what they do and call that the tasks. We could also maybe instead visualize, what it's like for a patient from the moment they call us until the moment they've reappointed and paid, all the tasks that they see as well. You see, our business is made up of patient-facing tasks, and our business is made up of non-patient-facing tasks. And those tasks form the day-to-day operations. Those tasks have a best way of doing them. There's a recipe to do each one the right way. And when we do them the right way, we have kind of these numbers we get to measure that say we're good. These numbers that we measure are called key performance indicators or metrics. Before I go to the next slide, let me say that almost all of the practice management advice you hear and you see or you learn has to do with this, has to do with the operations. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of practice management training out there for the other two pillars, the financial management and the people management. So the operations is what we're kind of used to thinking about. It's what we see when we show up to work, and it's what we spend a lot of time trying to learn, trying to perfect. I mentioned that one way of looking at these operations is from the patient's perspective in a way. I want to show you here on this slide now. This is kind of the path where we start with marketing and we end up at the very end collecting money. And there's these kind of main knobs, these operational knobs that we can turn to either be healthy or unfortunately they can go down to being unhealthy. And so as I read through this slide with you, we start with marketing. We are going to market to not get patients, but to get potential patients that we call leads. Leads are phone calls that can come in. They're clicks to schedule, but that lead hasn't gotten scheduled yet. They haven't been converted. So they're just a lead. We must market properly from a strategic marketing standpoint, content, as well as a spend, and the whole science behind picking the right audience to market to. That has an entire list of best practices that most of us rely on outside marketing firms to do for us. But that generates leads. From there, that lead comes in and we have to handle the lead, usually as a phone call. Are we turning that lead into an appointment? Unfortunately, a lot of practices, actually the national average of practices, misses a ton of phone calls. About a third of new patient calls are never answered. And the ones we do answer, just because we answered them doesn't mean the patient even scheduled. Less than half of the new patient calls we actually answer and talk to, less than half of those schedule. So we have this huge hole in most dental practices happening at lead conversion to appointment. And there's a set of best practices that we have to understand, we have to train and implement, and we have to audit to maintain as a CEO. And I'm going to show you some ways of doing that. Once we get an appointment, are people showing? What day-to-day operations ensure that? That's about our confirmation process, right? Our follow-up process. And then they show up, and what is their experience? Is the facility clean? Is it stocked? Are we giving them amenities, a comfort menu to choose from? Are our employees actually performing those tasks as we've told them to? As a CEO, we in our people management are going to be able to see, are they doing these things or not? We're going to have a way, a framework, a system for us as a CEO to always know and always guarantee that these things are being done. Then, of course, we have to diagnose dentistry. The more we diagnose, the more we grow. So the more procedures we know how to diagnose, the more we grow. The more focused we are on preventative, on cosmetic, the more diligent we are in using technology to find problems. All of that causes growth that we have to track as a CEO. And then, of course, we've got the case acceptance that happens clinically in the patient's mind. Do they accept that they need the work and understand why? And then we got the financial case acceptance. Do they accept the fact that they're going to agree to pay this amount to get the work done? Both of those areas also have a recipe that we are going to implement and manage as a CEO. And then, are we scheduling it properly? Are we billing for it? And are we collecting it? Now, what I've tried to do right now is show you that the vast majority of chaotic activity you find in a dental practice during the day, the vast majority of that can be noisy. But if we can filter out the noise to these dozen things or so, these are the dozen things that are actually causing your productivity in your collections. So, one skill as a CEO that we have to develop, we have to be able to put down on paper the things we must track and manage so that that becomes a priority over all the other noisy, foggy, confusing moments of the day. We don't want to get distracted by issues and ignore our clinical case acceptance, ignore our financial case acceptance, ignore our collections. We don't want to become a victim of low performance resulting in a bad financial, result. We want to proactively control these things. Here are some national averages that are pretty eye-opening. 100 new patients call a typical practice, and only 68 are answered. So it's a 68% answer rate. And of those 68 that are answered, only 29 are scheduled. And of the 29 that are scheduled, only 16 are diagnosed. How many should be diagnosed? Out of the 29, for example, appointments, the 29 exams we do, how many of those exams should have something diagnosed? We know how to fix broken things. We know how to diagnose preventative things. We know how to diagnose and talk about elective things. And if we think of all of those things, restorative, preventative, elective, what percent of our exams should have something diagnosed? The national average is only about half. And of those 16, if we look back at this slide, those 16 patients that get a diagnosis, the average diagnosis this year was exactly $1,600 per patient. That is based on the largest data nationwide of dental offices that have measured these numbers. It came out this year happened to be exactly $1,600 average treatment plan per patient. And of that, only 34% of the treatment plans were ever scheduled and completed. So let me kind of sum this column up for you. If you are a victim of your practice and not proactively leading it, then you will likely fall within this national average path that says for every 100 new patient calls you get, you end up with $8,700 on the schedule. Now, what do you do as a CEO? When you're managing day-to-day operations, you want to know what your numbers are with these very important knobs, because obviously we can make each of these lines an entire project for a month, a project where we find out the right recipe, we implement it, maybe micromanaging that implementation, and we heavily audit it until it's all the way screwed in and we have improved the number. These 5 numbers I've just gone through with you, or 6 numbers, starting with 100 new patient calls down to scheduled, represent some of the most important kind of dynamic operational activities or results in a practice. If we buy a practice and can grow any of these knobs, the result might be exponential. If we start a practice, but we become masters of some of these knobs, our growth becomes fast. If you're a CEO of an existing practice and you're ready to kind of enter the next level of growth, one very thoughtful thing to maybe do is to focus on these knobs. What I'm about to show you is not the national average. I'm about to show you the top performing groups across the country for each knob. Now, no one is the top performing at everything, but you can be top performing at multiple knobs for sure. And here are the top performers. If we start with 100 new patient calls again, 95 are answered, not 68, 95. And of the 95 that are answered, we get 77 appointments because we have an 81% conversion rate. How do we get such a high scheduling conversion rate compared to the national average? We get that by having in-depth phones training. There are certain ways of handling a call that result in a lot of appointments compared to a normal way of handling a call. And we also get that by looking at the friction points of our practice. Do we have certain practice policies that are maybe preventing people from scheduling? Maybe we haven't blocked enough openings for new patients, so they're being booked out too far that they never schedule, they never convert, example. So as a CEO, to get that top performer, we're going to have to make call conversion our focus, and we're going to have to learn and implement that training, and then again, oversee it with a micromanage aspect and audit it until it's all the way in. And from those 77, if we go back to the slide, from the 77 we schedule, we diagnose 3/4 if we're a top performer. And we end up with a $2,500 treatment plan on average. And the number I really want you to focus on is this last one. $79,000 of scheduled treatment if hypothetically we were a top performer for every knob. If we were in the top performing group for every knob, our realistic ceiling would be 79 grand as opposed to 8,700. That's a massive difference. Now, it's not realistic to be a top performer in every group, but of these 5 or so areas, it's very realistic to master 3 of them and be okay in the last 2. And so maybe 79,000 is the ceiling, but maybe 40,000 is realistic, which means that every $500,000 collection a year practice out there could be $2.5 million, or every $1 million practice in collections every year could be a $5 million practice if we answered calls better, we converted better, we diagnosed more fully, we presented better, and had more people scheduled. And this is how a CEO will kind of look at the practice and say, all right, what operations should we focus on? We don't focus on everything. We're going to look at the primary drivers first. And we first have to, of course, know our numbers. So we're going to need to get AI software to listen to our phones, for example, and tell us, what are we converting? We're going to have to get metrics tracking software and tell us what's our diagnostic rate, what's our case acceptance percentage, the dollars accepted, the dollars scheduled. And when we see those numbers, we can then make them a priority. Maybe instead of wasting money on a CE course for ourselves, we would invest money in correcting one of these numbers as a CEO to finally have phones corrected, for example, so that for the rest of our career, we've elevated our success. Okay? So this forms the foundation of what we're going to track on the operational side. I'm going to add to this, but this is giving you a taste of like, okay, how as a CEO do we actually use metrics? We're going to recognize the key driving metrics, and then the ones that are down, we're going to make it a monthly project, many times with outside help, consultants or courses or training, and always with micromanaged implementation. We are going to have a project every month to correct one of these numbers. Now, if we do this, we elevate what we're able to achieve on a consistent basis. But now I want to kind of introduce a different concept to you. As a CEO, I want you, and we're still in operations, I want you to become passionate about what I've typed here on this slide. A mandatory weekly production minimum. Those words are very important. Mandatory, meaning no matter what, there is no excuse we must achieve. It's mandatory. Weekly, meaning we're going to look at a weekly set of numbers. Production is going to be adjusted production. And the minimum, the lowest number that we must hit every week from an adjusted production standpoint. Now, let's kind of make an assumption for a second. What if for you to have consistent financial health, you need to collect 100 grand a month? Just making something up. Of course, we want you to collect more, right? We want you to like hit home runs. We want you to do way more than this theoretical number I'm coming up with. But at 100 grand a month, if we hit that every week, you are living a good life. Your company is healthy. Your staff costs are where they should be. All of the costs make sense. You are a healthy company if we achieve at least that much collections. That number, that 100 grand must become your minimum. It's mandatory. Here's what that means in practice. As a CEO, every Monday morning, you're going to look at what's scheduled for the week. And if you don't have 100 grand scheduled, you are going to ring the alarm bell that is going to activate new tasks. Let's say you've got 92 scheduled. Excuse me. Let me back up. I said the wrong numbers. I apologize. Let me back up. Let's say 100 grand a month is what you need to be healthy. Let's take that to a week. Let's say it's 25,000 a week. All right. So I apologize. I got ahead of myself. So if we do 25,000 a week, we're really healthy. We're stable. We're strong. Everything makes sense about what we're doing. Our profitability is good. 25,000 a week is like that healthy mark. We want more than that, but 25,000 a week is very healthy. Let's say that's your number. As a CEO, come Monday morning, you're going to look at the week. And if you don't have that 25 grand on your schedule, we have a problem. We're going to ring the alarm bell. We're going to activate new tasks, and we are going to make it our biggest priority to get 25,000 on the books for that week. Let's say we start the week at 21,000. What do we do? Well, I can tell you what you stop doing are non-essential tasks. For example, you stop processing EOBs for that day. Of course, we have to process EOBs in our practice, but we could delay it a day or two or three. We could procrastinate it. We can let the EOBs pile up a little bit, because what's now more important than processing payments is getting enough production on the schedule so that our company stays healthy. You see, what we want is, as a CEO, is we want to be able to impact the final result. We know 25,000 for the week, we are good and healthy. If we start the week and we're trending less than that, now we gotta put on our CEO hat and impact change. And we are going to activate new tasks of filling the schedule and deactivate non-essential tasks such as processing EOBs or resubmitting failed claims. Of course, those things eventually have to be done, but right now, today, Monday, the most important thing is correct this issue. If we are doing that, that means that we are now, everyone in the practice has a job for this. So my insurance coordinator who's processing payments is now going to be making calls out. My scheduler is going to be calling all the patients that are already on the schedule and trying to have them bring their family members in that are overdue or try to convert additional same-day dentistry on them. My hygienist is going to try to convert same-day dentistry, same-day preventative, same-day perio. My doctor is going to try to convert same-day dentistry as well. And I don't actually care if we're tired or if we're running behind. This is a crisis week where we're below health. And so we might have to stay an hour late to achieve goal. But what about a different kind of week? A week where we're already over goal. We check in Monday morning, 25 is our minimum. We're at 27. Great. Now let's put all the additional work that we diagnose not into this week, but next week. Did y'all just hear me? If we're on goal already, we're going to push the new treatment into the following week. So that week gets on goal. And the next week gets on goal. And the next week does. And rarely would we have to activate a crisis moment to get on goal. What's the result of this strategy? Consistency. A consistent day, a consistent week, consistently bringing income, consistently paying bills, consistently being healthy. We have to build that muscle as a CEO first. Can we control the number we end up at? Can we get it to 25,000 because we've built the muscle of activating people when we need to? Once we achieve that and it becomes super easy, where 25 is always achieved, we might choose to raise it to 28. We might choose to grow that muscle. But what we're not trying to do is cram the most amount of dentistry we can into any given day or week. No, we are trying to have consistent success, not roller coaster performance, where we have a huge day and a terrible day and a huge week and a horrible week. That's hard to staff. That's hard to emotionally manage. That's hard to physically manage. What we want is to be so buttoned up from a leadership standpoint that we know when to activate, we know when to step on the gas, and we also know when we don't have to rush and step on the gas, because we will end up on time in a healthy way by the end of the week, hitting our mandatory minimum. So that's another kind of muscle we need to build as a CEO from the operations standpoint. So remember, there's 3 pillars here. We're only talking about operations right now. The metrics, from the time we send marketing and get a lead, to scheduling them, to diagnosing, to getting it accepted, all the way to collecting. That gives us our collections. And when the collections for the week are not trending high enough for health, we are going to add more fuel, add more emphasis, be more thoughtful about getting the machine of operations going better and faster. When we're already on goal, we're not going to strain our machine. We're going to put the new extra into the following week so that we achieve balance and consistency. And only then have we built the muscle to control this. And only after then should we start raising the goals to be more than just healthy, but to actually be exceptional. Okay, that represents operations. And we're going to touch on operations when we get to people again, but that's the first pillar, operations. I hope that's helpful. Now let's go to the second pillar. The second pillar has to do with how we spend our money, finances. This is an area where a lot of dentist owners are so busy cutting teeth, so busy trying to put out the operational fires, that we never really become a CEO of our finances. Most dentists don't even have a profit and loss statement they look at that's accurate, that's clean, so they can even assess what's going on. When we look at finances, we need to minimize what we spend. I'm not talking about compromising our business. I'm not talking about being cheap, but there's definitely a line that says if we spend more than this, it's actually wasteful. We are going to cut out waste. So here's an example of a profit and loss statement. And this practice collects $2 million a year. And I'm going to fast forward one slide and then I'll go back. It collects $2 million a year, but its take-home pay is over $1 million a year. In other words, this practice has a little bit less than 50% overhead, which is the typical practice in our model. The typical practice in our model it's a beautiful office typically. It's high tech. It's a smaller team many times with very high take-home pay, low overhead. So when we look at this profit and loss statement, as a CEO managing our finances, we're now looking at the percentages and the ratios. A very quick way to kind of communicate to us, are some of these expenses getting out of hand or are they healthy? Those staff costs, 25% on this profit and loss statement is a little bit more than I would want. If this was an owner-driven practice, we would likely be closer to 20 instead of 25. If this were a practice with only associate dentists don't produce quite as much. This would be more around 28% as a goal. But you can see in this example, we're at 25%. Then you look at the second line, doctor wages. This is just whatever we happen to pay a dentist owner or whatever we happen to pay an associate. The third line, production, the third category, this is where there's a lot of opportunity typically to correct things in a practice. Our dental and office supplies combined needs to be less than 4%. Our lab fees need to be less than 5. Less than 4 would be even better. And notice we're pulling out Invisalign or liner lab fees, and we're pulling out implant supplies, implant parts. Those things are not very budgetable. We've got, an aligner fee whenever we start a new case. We've got to buy implant parts whenever we have a new case. Everything else, though, that we do in dentistry is very predictable and very easy to manage when we implement a budget. So no order should go out that puts us over budget. Our labs we choose need to be good quality, but we need to make sure that what we're choosing fits within a reasonable budget for our practice. So when we look at supplies, it's dental supplies plus office supplies combined. So it's bonding agent and toilet paper and printer ink and coffee and composite. It's everything combined. That needs to be below 4%, which means as a CEO, I need to look at every weekly order when all the shopping carts are filled up. And before that order goes out, I need to approve the order for 1 minute once a week. Is it below 4% of collections or not? Is it on budget that week or not? If it's not, the order needs to be adjusted. We need to reduce it. If it is on budget, great. I then approve it as a CEO. Again, it takes me 1 minute, but it will usually dramatically reduce the cost for a practice to actually buy on a budget. What's it like when you don't have a budget and you go to the grocery store? You buy whatever you feel like buying and you justify it. There's reason. But how much of that food that you bought did you end up throwing away? What happens when you go clothes shopping or Amazon scrolling or whatever it might be when you don't have a budget? You almost always spend more and you don't necessarily spend it on only things you need. And that's fine. That's your personal life. But when it comes to running a business as a CEO, we have to ensure that we only spend it on things we need. And that is ensured by enforcing a budget. Now, if we look at this, keep looking at this financial statement, we can also see other cost items such as the facility. We can look at the general and admin category. There's a lot of things that kind of eat away our budget. And, back to staffing costs. What if our staffing costs are too high? Well, we could be overstaffed with too many people, but usually that's not the case. We could have an overtime problem. People are just taking overtime all the time, but usually that's not the case. We could have a model issue, meaning we're running unassisted hygiene when assisted hygiene might be better, might be more healthy for the business. Or we could be having too many low fees in our practice. We're taking Medicare, Medicaid, or poorly paying insurance plans, and maybe we need to market heavily, get good diagnosis of case acceptance so that we can afford to drop some of that. But ultimately, when staff costs are too high, it's usually indicative that we're not collecting enough, that we're not collecting enough for the people that we need to have. We need to have an assistant. We need to have, a receptionist, but we might not be collecting enough. So sometimes it is a staff cutting thing that you might do as a CEO, cut if you truly are over. But many times you've got to go back to your operations and you got to say, okay, how am I going to grow the collections without hiring more people? Do I need to implement facial aesthetics? Do I need to have a better perio protocol? Do I need to raise case acceptance with better payment policies? You go back to the operations to raise our collections without hiring more people. That's usually the journey you have to take to get staff costs under control if they're not. So this is the result we want. We want to take home half or more from a dental practice. If we're achieving a 50% overhead or less, we are healthy. That's my expectation. My expectation is that we are 50% overhead or less, no more than 50%. That is a company that's being run by a CEO. That is also, by the way, a practice that can afford to pay people at the top levels. That's a practice that can afford to invest in technology, to invest in renovating the office to be beautiful. That's a practice that's not forced to take every insurance under the sun. They're not forced to be open too many hours a week. Once you achieve healthy overhead, you get to throw away some of these compromises that are plaguing you right now. So the easier expenses to control, I've listed here for you. Supply lab, credit card fees we can completely get rid of, staffing costs, but also these recurring things, these $199 a month, $99 a month, $399 a month for this, that, and the other that you may not be using or that has become obsolete because you've got another software program that'll do the same thing now. So we can get rid of those recurring fees, get rid of the discretionary expenses, stop spending money through your company in an unhealthy way just because you're like justifying it. It's a tax write-off. No, don't make that expense. Or, don't overdo it on spending on CE. If you're not healthy yet, then you can't afford to do major continuums and things like that. So we got to be thoughtful to get healthy first. And then when we can afford extra, then we do extra. But if you do extra first, you may never become healthy, right? So these are the things that we can control. As a CEO, what does that mean? It means once a month, you are auditing your company for these expenses. And if everything's on ratio, you're moving on and you're happy. If something's off ratio, you are being triggered as a CEO to make it a priority. That you're going to say, whoa, okay, our supply costs got over budget. Come next month, that's now going to be my micromanaged focus as a CEO to get rid of that decay in my company so that we're healthy again. That's what that means. But of course, you got to have a profit and loss statement that is organized properly and accurate so that you as a CEO can perform this monthly audit and then be triggered to act appropriately. So that's the second pillar, expense management. The first pillar is all those operations. It creates collections. Right? Second pillar is the way we spend the money. The third pillar, people, managing people. God, we could probably have an entire 2-year-long dental residency teaching us how to manage people and still not get through everything. But I want to hit the main points that maybe you're missing right now as a CEO. Managing people. What I hear is that I wish I had good people. I wish I could find good people. I wish I could keep good people. I wish I had accountability. It seems like people just aren't doing everything I expect them to do, or they don't care as much, or they complain, or they feel entitled, right? These are all kind of things I hear from practices that are missing a CEO. So what does it mean to manage people? How do we have accountability? How do we have the kind of communication that lowers stress, that prevents problems, right? If you have a lack of accountability today, if you have problems, drama, stress, then just understand what you do today is not working. All right. As much as you're trying and as much good intent that you have and passion for your practice that you might have, it's not working. So we've got to put that on a shelf and say, okay, we're going to put that on the shelf, the not working shelf. We tried that. Now we need to try something different if you want a different result, of course. All right. So let me walk you through some layers of this that might help you elevate how you're able to get that accountability, get that consistency, and feel like you're improving how you're managing the people side of your company. So people, what do they do? In essence, part of managing people is making sure they're doing their job. They're doing their job. What does that mean? They're doing their tasks, all the tasks they have to do every day, all the tasks they have to do in every single appointment. What does a dental assistant have to do every appointment? They got to take blood pressure, update medical history. They got to take x-rays. They got to assist you in the procedure. Of course, seat the patient on time. They got to turn over the room. There's tasks there. But also outside of the appointment, that person that must be managed has daily tasks. They have to restock the ops and clean the ops and turn on the compressor, turn off the compressor. They've got to unpack the shipments and they've got to log in the lab cases. There's these tasks that make up their job. Their job, if it were to have a description, could be a list of tasks. And what we must do, here's an example of a list of tasks for a treatment coordinator, just an example. But what you could see is we're taking this list of tasks, but we're turning it into actually a tool for them to use that we call a checklist. So the first component of managing people is making sure they've got a tool in their hand that helps them remember all the tasks they even got to do. Because if they're not even remembering everything they got to do every single day or every single patient, we're broken right off the bat. They're not taking a post-op x-ray on a patient and now we're not getting paid. They're not restocking the ops and now we're taking too much time, or we have this kind of friction in our flow. Like, we got to make sure that they have something in their hand every day that makes it nearly foolproof to remember what tasks we have to perform. That's the checklist. That's one component of managing people. Now, of course, when you hire someone new and you have a checklist, training becomes very predictable. Training becomes faster. Welcome to the practice, treatment coordinator. Here's what you do every day. So that's a component of being a CEO, is we've got to provide an environment where our people can operate at a high level, and having a checklist is a key component to that. But just because they have a checklist doesn't mean we have accountability. A checklist is going to help them remember what to do, but the audit is going to create an environment of immediate accountability. So as a CEO, a component of what we do every day is a very quick audit. We audit the chart, a chart from yesterday, and we audit the facility, the practice. The chart, did we collect the right amount of money? Did we complete the treatment? Did we get a consent form signed? Did we do the probing? Did we reappoint the patient? Do we have clinical notes? You see, we're happy when we find a moment where we screwed something up. Every time we find something in a chart that wasn't done properly is a moment we as a CEO get to reinforce accountability, reinforce positive accountability. I got 5 kids. If my wife or if I tell them, go clean your room, but I never walk up there and see if it was actually done. It's just not going to be done all the time. But if I walk up there and see it's not done and tell them they can't do anything until it's done and let me know when you're ready for me to check. In other words, if I audit that room, it creates a culture of accountability in my house that in the future, when I tell them to clean their room, they know I'm going to look and it will be done. In a similar way, if we use that analogy, that's what happens here. When we find that, consent form wasn't signed or the restroom's not clean when we go audit it, that's a moment where we get to enforce the fact that we have accountability. And when we have that accountability moment, it kind of reinforces the fact that the employee needs to use their checklist so that they don't forget the consent form and they don't forget to go clean the restroom twice a day like their checklist says. You see, so many times the simple act of checking is what's missing in your accountability. And again, I said positive moment of accountability. When we find an issue, it's not a negative moment. It's not like you screwed up, dang it, I told you to do this and you're not doing it. It's not that. You might have those feelings, but as a good CEO of serving people, you are like a personal trainer. You are positively holding them accountable. So if you don't lift a weight right, a personal trainer doesn't start cussing you out and telling you how bad you are. No. They are lifting you up in a positive way. We must do the same through auditing. Well, until they're just never doing it every time we audit. I go look at my kid's room and they're just never cleaning it and they're lying to me saying they have. Well, then we will have a problem. But we don't start there. We don't start with negativity. We don't start with conflict. We start instead with positivity. And that is a key thing that so many offices are missing. Also, by the way, when you audit, not only do you find those moments where you need to have accountability, you also recognize all the things your team does well. You see that so many times when you look at things, they're doing it. They're doing it well. It gives you reassurance. It helps you sleep better at night. It gives you a moment to validate to them that they are doing a great job. Now, we've got a checklist to help them understand what to do. We've got an audit to make sure we have accountability. We also need to address communication with team members. Here's a list of meetings. Let's talk about the dreaded word meeting, but I want you to throw away your negativity. That meeting is going to be insanely valuable as a CEO. You see, a regularly scheduled, habitually scheduled meeting becomes a moment everyone knows is coming, where we can address whatever we need to address in that meeting, in that structure, in that channel. If we've got a morning huddle every day, or we've got a weekly check-in meeting, or we've got a monthly implementation meeting, or we've got a quarterly strategic planning meeting, we have a moment where bringing things up is appropriate, is planned for. Now, I, as a dental assistant, may feel like this month's meeting is a waste of time because I don't have anything to bring, and whatever we're talking about doing new next month doesn't even involve me. And so it might feel like a waste of time this month. But next month, I'm so thankful we have the meeting because I did need to bring something up. I did need to be heard. I do need to be validated. I do need to ask questions. So the point of the meeting isn't to make it super valuable for everyone. Meetings are only always valuable for one person, and that's the owner. Everyone else is going to have moments of value and moments where it's not value, it's value for someone else. But having this meeting habitually scheduled guarantees that you have the communication you need as a CEO. And your team will rely on that. Your team will now know they can be heard, they can ask, they can learn. You know when to bring things up as well, when to train people, when to talk about things. And this peels away some of the brewing conflict that can happen, in a dental practice. when we lack these meetings, things cook, problems get bigger, issues get unresolved because no one's talking about them. Conflicts and drama can kind of swell. These meetings help alleviate that. But what's also important is the meeting will force you as a CEO to stay organized. When you know you've got a quarterly meeting to create the next quarter's plan of what you're going to implement, it will cause you to sit down, stop, and reset mentally about your business. And if we were going to think of 3 big things to do next quarter, what should they be? If you didn't have that quarterly meeting scheduled, you may not stop and reset. You're so busy cutting teeth and trying to race home that you're not even like pausing to do a very important thing. And when you have that monthly meeting, it again forces you as a CEO to prepare for it, to understand what we're going to talk about, understand what we're going to do. It forces you, in a way, it brings you accountability to be a CEO. And every single one of these meetings needs to have a formal outline, a formal structure, the same outline we go through, because that outline ensures we haven't forgotten to talk about what we're supposed to talk about, what's important. We're going to have an outline that says we're going to talk about this, then we're going to talk about this section, and this topic, and then that topic, and that's what this meeting is for. So that is another layer of people management. We started with, here's a checklist to make sure you understand what to do. We added, here's an audit to bring accountability. And then we layer in, here's a very healthy, thoughtful, habitualized meeting structure so that everyone will always be heard and validated and understand and learn. And the CEO will also be held accountable to that. When we do these things, we've now really improved maybe our ability to manage people proactively. Think about what having accountability would mean to your practice. Think about what would happen if you had healthy meetings. Think about what would happen if everyone had a checklist to remind them what to do every day. Only good can come of that. Now, as a CEO, I want to kind of back up now when I'm managing people, and I want to kind of create my own checklist. I need to perform certain audits every day. I need to have certain meetings every day. I need to look at the financials every month. I need to look at the metrics. I need to look at the day sheets and the adjustments, and I need to pay the bills. So there's also tasks I have to do as a CEO. Let's write those down, and let's now give ourselves a tool to become and be the CEO we need to be every day without having to remember anything, without having to worry about it. It's already pre-organized for us. Let's just follow the list. That will probably make us a lot more effective than not having it. I've also got on this slide the word scorecards. If I can kind of step back as a CEO, and in my metrics tracking platform I'm using, I can create a scorecard that has those 5 or 10 operational metrics I need to look at. And it has a way for me to enter in the financial metrics. I can, in a way, kind of automate the report card I should be looking at every week or every month. I can build, in these metrics tracking platforms, you can build a custom scorecard that shows you what you need to see as a CEO, so that it's even more convenient for you to review that and to act on it and to track it. Are we getting better or worse? So scorecards become a really cool tool for you to save time for yourself. If we have our set of scorecards and we have our CEO checklist that tells us what to audit and look at, and if we're having structured meetings, man, we've done a lot of really important tasks to get control of this practice. And if we're enforcing a weekly minimum of health, we know how to build that muscle and always achieve that number. We're really starting to get consistency with this thing. And that's without even improving the day-to-day metrics, right? We do want to improve the numbers. We want to also keep the costs at bay. All of this takes time. When do you have time to do this? It actually only takes about 15 minutes a day, plus another maybe 15 minutes of dealing with the issues you found. I call this CEO time. So every day we cut teeth, of course, but we better also every day block part of our day to be the CEO we need to be, to do the checklist, to do the audit, to look at the numbers, to have the conversations we need to have. And I encourage you to block out the first half hour of every day. It'll take you 15 minutes when you're fresh in the morning to do the checklist. It'll take you another maybe 15 minutes to address the issues you found, to have that accountability. And then you can go cut teeth for the rest of your day. I'm not saying get there 30 minutes early to be a CEO. I don't trust you to get there 30 minutes early to be a CEO. What I want you to do is get there on time for your morning huddle and then not cut teeth for 30 minutes. And you will make a lot more money not cutting teeth, but running the company. You'll make a lot more money that way than if you were just to cut another tooth. You'll also have a lot more sanity. Running the company can be super stressful, and it can feel like we're like racing and juggling at the same time. We're sprinting and juggling at the same time, and it has to be perfect. That's what it could feel like. Like there's no room for a wrong move. We're going so fast, any wrong move, and we crash in the day. That's what it can feel like. I want to use an analogy that I think is very important. So let's say, here's a speedometer. Let's say our effort in our practice is kind of like driving in a car, and we have to drive 10 miles in our car, drive 10 miles. If we were to go 20 miles an hour, it would take us a long time to drive 10 miles. It'd take us a half an hour. But if we were to go just a little bit faster, if we were to drive 30 miles an hour instead of 20, we save a lot of time. Now it only takes us 20 minutes to go those 10 miles. So increasing our speed by 10 makes a significant difference in time savings. All right. Well, what if we're going fast already? What if we're going 70? It takes us 8.5 minutes to drive our 10 miles. And if we go another 10 in speed, just like we did earlier, if we go from 70 to 80, we've only saved 1 minute. You see, going from 70 miles an hour to 80 miles an hour only saves us 1 minute. We squeezed in, we white knuckled, we sped through to try to get that last extra minute saved. Is it worth it? When you go from 70 to 80 miles an hour, you have a 31% increase in crashing, 49% increase in injury, and a 71% increase in a fatality to save a minute. When you are running your practice and white knuckling it and going 80 miles an hour to get through the day, you have an increased chance of crashing your day, of burning through your emotional sanity, and of just getting completely burnt out and dead in dentistry. What I want you to do, instead of saving a minute by running faster and working harder and more, what if we just left a couple minutes early and just went 70 miles an hour, but we left 4 or 5 minutes early? Maybe we just go 60 miles an hour. What an easy drive if we can just get prepared and ahead of ourselves and just leave a little bit early. Just do the right thing up front, and we don't have to risk and strain and stress and push through our career. So to me, spending time to get organized as a CEO with a checklist, with a scorecard, with the metrics and the audits and the financials, and taking 30 minutes first will help us just coast through the day, hit our numbers, and be incredibly profitable. We're not going to get more successful doing the same thing faster. We have to stop and retool, reset, so that we don't do things with such risk. That's not where success comes from. You want to get there earlier, freaking get ready earlier and leave earlier. Be prepared up front. That's how you get there earlier. We're not going to go from 70 to 80 and shave off a minute and maybe crash and kill someone. That's not what we're going to do. Now, having said that, I love going fast and I love sports cars, but you understand my analogy. So another concept that is overused. We hear about it all the time. The 80-20 principle. 80% of your success will come from 20% of your efforts. 80% of your collections comes from 20% of your patients. 80% of your problems come from 20% of your people, right? That 80-20 principle. But I want to think of it in another way. What if we only did 20% right as a CEO, but it was the right 20%? So maybe we're not having a perfect meeting, but we're having the meeting. Maybe we don't know all the recipes to run all the numbers perfectly, but we're tracking them and we're trying to fix one when it's down. Maybe not perfect with the financials and spending everything right, but we have clean financials. And when something's out of whack, we're going to try. Maybe we don't have a big kind of organized way of being a CEO, but we're at least going to block off the time and try to create a simple checklist. We're going to do like the 20% of the effort that gives you most of the result. That's actually all I want you to do. I don't even want you to do 100%. I don't want you to be a perfect CEO. I only want you to be a lazy CEO that's highly effective. You hit it on the bullseye. You don't have to be great and amazing. You don't have to be Superman here in this practice and do everything that a CEO might do. You just got to do the key things. Let's not worry about 100 numbers. Let's just look at 6. Let's just look at patient flow. And let's just, back up. Let's just see, are we answering phones? Are we converting them? How much are we diagnosing? What's our case acceptance? And how deep are we collecting? Like if we just look at those 5 numbers and just put our time on that and forget the other 80% of the numbers, we will achieve great success. So being a CEO is not about doing it all and being perfect. Being a CEO first is about getting the 20% under your belt, the 20%. And the 20% takes time and it takes organization. You have to prepare. You know how to do this. You got into dental school. You know how to study. You know how to delay gratification. You know how to get the minimum you need to get to achieve your result. You know how in life to get prepared to do something. This must be the next priority we prepare for. Some of you can do this on your own. You're the kind that wakes up at 4 a.m. and goes and does CrossFit on your own, and you always eat right on your own, and you're always super prepared for everything because you are a master of discipline and delayed gratification and self-control. That's amazing. I admire you tremendously for that. I'm not that way. I wish I was. I'm someone that won't wake up at 4 to work out. I have to have a personal trainer, and now I have accountability. I'm someone that won't eat right unless someone makes the meal for me and it's healthy. And then I'll eat it out of convenience. I have to have that set up for me to have the result. I have to work off of a schedule. If I want time off and if I'm going to go date my wife this week or spend time with my kids or, prepare for my estate planning or whatever, it's actually got to be on my schedule. Otherwise, I'm not organized enough mentally to get everything done I have to get done. See, I have to have tools like a schedule. I have to have accountability. I have to have outside help. And I think a lot of people are like that. So for a CEO, it might be that you need a coach. You might need accountability. You might need to sit down and prepare and build yourself a schedule, build yourself a list. And there's not a good reason to not prioritize this. Especially if you own the company, like this is what you signed up for. You are in so much debt and you don't spend the rest of your days in a CEO-less environment. You got to reset. Maybe we take this year or this is the year we're going to reset and we're going to develop that next phase of our professional life. Now, I talked about these 3 pillars. operations, what people do every day. Those are metrics we can look at. That's training we can do. We give them checklists to let them remember what to do, and we audit them to make sure our operations are healthy enough. And we're going to have a weekly minimum that we do not allow our practice to go below. We will work until midnight if we have to on a Tuesday, but we won't have to very often. But we will not let our practice be unhealthy. Okay, that's operations. Got financials. How are we spending money? We're going to look at it once a month. And everything that's healthy, great. But when it's not healthy, oh, that's decay. We're going to now get triggered to look deeper. How deep is this decay? How do I fix it? How do I make sure that we correct it immediately? Because we can't spend away our collections. We won't have any profit. We won't have any take-home pay. We got the people, checklists, auditing, meetings, scorecards. Notice I'm not talking about culture, being likable, being a servant leader. I'm just talking about the 20%. The very logical building blocks of managing the people side of a company come in looking at their performance and having checklists and having accountability with audits and having meetings. Of course, there can be so much more to being a great leader. But right now, let's get the foundation in place. So those are the 3 pillars as I see them to being a dental CEO. And I hope that in these 3 pillars, you found moments where you're like, I'm not there yet. I heard someone say last week, a life coach actually, super cool, Steve Collins, he said, sometimes people say, I've just done the best I can. I want you to reframe that. This is what he said, reframe it. Don't say I've done the best I can. How about you say, have I done everything that could be done? I know you've done the best that you thought you could do, but have you done everything that could be done? Have you prepared? Have you outlined things? Do you have a meeting? Do you have the financials? Could you do that? Do you have a coach? Have you gotten educated? Could you do those things? Also, another thing Steve said to our group at our retreat last week is he said, a lot of people say, I don't have time. He wants us to say instead, and I challenge you to say the same thing. Don't say I don't have time. Say to yourself, I didn't make it a priority. I don't have time to build a checklist. No, you didn't make it a priority. You didn't make it a priority to do these things you know you need to do. You either have the self-discipline to start making it a priority, or you're going to need to be in an environment that holds you accountable to making it a priority. I'm just speaking the truth right now. So I want you to think through those things. Now, what's the next step for you? If you've gotten value out of these things, I hope that you can, on your own, with your own self-discipline, start looking at incorporating these layers into your life. If you want more from me, if you want to be educated in like a deep boot camp environment where you learn 16 hours of this stuff on being a great CEO, or 16 hours of great operations, or how to have multiple locations or buy practices, this is the next step. I have these seminars. All of you probably know I do these seminars. They're well known. I bet most of you have attended some of them. These are the seminars that I offer. Because we're talking here, my team wanted to offer you a way to save money. And I'd take a picture of this right now if I were you. You can go to this QR code. It's not public. You can go to this QR code and you can save money on seminars, and you could even bundle things together. If you haven't done everything you could do, and some of these seminars are the things you should do, like get formal CEO training, get formal practice management training, then this would be a way for you to do it, schedule it, and you could save money if you do it this way. Of course, I coach people. Maybe some of my coaching clients are on this because some of you guys log on to everything I do, which is super awesome. But I really encourage you to take your career seriously. What is the next step for you to reset and to achieve the next level you need? Do it on your own. I hope this was valuable, or of course I can help you. So the 3 pillars to being a dental CEO. I really appreciate all of you logging in. I hope, like I always hope when I do these webinars, that I've touched someone, that something here is valuable to you, that something's speaking to you. And if that's you and you want me to help you, this is your next step. And of course, I hope I hope that you take advantage of this and that I see you and that you save this money by making a commitment to do this for your career. All right. Best of luck with everything. I know that we have some questions here. Going to try to answer the questions probably after this if we need to. I got a lot of questions sent to me. But if you do have any follow-up questions, you can reach out to us. We'd be happy to help you further after this webinar. We will answer your questions. We will talk to you if that's what you need. If you need more clarification about anything you saw on these slides, we'd be happy to help you with that as well. All right, I'm going to go kiss my kids goodnight. I hope that this was valuable to you guys, and I will see you next time. Thanks a lot, everyone.